So before we actually get into today's video, I want to talk to you guys about jerseyfifa.com, because as you can see, they have hooked me up with a load of fresh shirts for this year's World Cup. I've got the England home kit, the England away kit, and also a nice little retro shirt. And you can do exactly the same if you head to jerseyfifa.com using the link in the description down below. They also do the same for club football as well. The latest home shirts, away shirts, but also some really nice retro kits. If you are interested, head to the link in the description down below and use code jerseyfifa for a discount when you order. Now into the video. Hey guys, welcome back to the AJ Analysis channel, where we are about to try and cover 3 games in the space of 24 hours. Now, you'll see other channels do it and think it's not that big a deal, but this is a one-man army. I am the only person on the channel, so we're going to try and do 3 games, and we're going to start off with Belgium's 1-0 win over Canada. Now, the title of the video says, How Belgium Beat Canada. That's not necessarily what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about literally what happened during the game. Yes, Belgium won, but in my opinion, they were not the better team. And I think Roberto Martinez got very, very lucky. I think he set his team up quite poorly, and Canada were the better team for large periods, but Belgium just had that bit of quality in that one split second that Canada didn't really have. So I want to start off by looking at Canada and what they look to do on the ball, because I was quite interested by their system. So we can see that both teams set up in what was essentially a 3-4-3, certainly on paper, but both of them changed slightly in certain game states as the game kind of ebbed and flowed. We saw some different shapes. The one that Canada used to try and play the ball out from the back was actually really, really interesting, and it's a shape I haven't seen from a back 3 in quite a while. So the way that they've done this was, what they want to do was avoid getting pressed 3 versus 3. We can see that Belgium have got a front 3. With Canada's back 3, that could make it very easy for Belgium to press them. They can just go man for man right up against them, stop them playing out from the back. So Canada had an interesting shape. They moved the right centre-back Johnston out to essentially a right-back role. They moved Vittoria across to a right centre-back position, Miller to a left centre-back position, Hutchinson in the hole here, and then Alphonso Davies kind of now become a left back. So which is a really interesting little tweak. They then pushed the right wing back much higher up the pitch, allowing the right winger to come inside, and Jonathan David kind of dropped a little bit deeper, almost into a midfield position. And like I said, this was just a really interesting shape. I found it really fascinating because we don't really see many teams doing this at all. It's such an interesting shape, and it made it really difficult for Belgium to press them because, as I was saying, they can't go man for man here because Canada have the extra players. They can kind of go man for man in midfield with Witsel and Tielemans, but we can still see here we have a 5 versus 3 and also a 6 versus 3 if you include the goalkeeper as well. Also, the wing-backs couldn't really commit to coming out and pressing because of Laria on this side and Hoyle on this side, stopping them from doing so. So actually, tactically, it was a really good setup from Canada, and what that allowed them to do was build possession and move the ball forward. Having moved the ball forward, we then again saw quite an interesting approach from Canada, and again, not your typical sort of approach that you would expect to see from this formation. Now, when you look at this lineup, this formation for Canada, you would think they're probably going to try and focus down the left-hand side, because they have an Alphonso Davies, his athleticism, but also his pure quality, alongside Junior Hoylett, who we know from the Premier League back in the day is a decent player. The other option you might think they might try and do is build in a 3-2 shape in the middle, with the back 3 here and the 2 central midfielders, try and build possession through the centre of the pitch, try and outnumber the Belgian midfielders with the wingers coming inside. Again, that didn't happen, and again the focus was down the right hand side, and again Johnston took up a really interesting position, because despite starting as a right centre back, in these situations he almost became a right back, which then allowed Laria to push really far forward, who was a wing back but now essentially a right winger, which then allowed Buchanan, not entirely sure how to say his name, I can only apologise for that, moving inside into these areas. And what it allowed them to do was again create an overload. So we saw them creating overloads in their own defensive third when trying to play out through the press. What we can see they've now got here is the number 2, the number 22 and the number 11 against Vertonghen and Carrasco. So again, Canada have been able to work the overload and get the ball in some really good areas, some really good opportunities, really good positions. They just kind of lacked that final delivery. The same was a little bit the case down the left-hand side. When it was Alphonso Davies up against Castagne, Alphonso Davies had him. Alphonso Davies was brilliant down this side of the pitch, got into some really good areas. Hoylett done some impressive stuff as well. The problem all night for Canada was that when they got into these areas, they just lacked that final bit of quality. And those that watch my Manchester United videos, it was kind of a similar case to what United often do. It was very rushed in the final third. At times, they just needed to take an extra touch, play an extra pass, work the ball about a bit, try and kind of pin Belgium back into their own defensive third, rather than getting into this area, I've immediately got to cross it. Because they did end up putting a lot of crosses into the box, And I just think Vertonghen, Alderweireld and Dendoncker are always going to beat Jonathan David in the air. He did get on the end of a couple of crosses, but they're those sorts of ones where you're like leaning back trying to header it, and it was never really a massive threat. So Canada ended up with high expected goals, but that was because they had a high volume of low opportunities. So if I take 30 shots, even if they're from quite far out, the expected goals is eventually going to add up simply because of the volume of shots. That's kind of what was happening for Canada. They got into good positions, but they really didn't create the good chances. And, well, I guess the one big chance they really had was the penalty. I'm not sure why Alphonso Davies took it. He has scored 2 out of 2 for Canada in the past, but Jonathan David is a more established penalty taker, scoring 9 out of 12 in his career. He would have been the man that I had on the penalties, but Canada disagreed and kind of paid for it. I've just realised part of this is behind me, isn't it? Jonathan David, in these areas, is where he was struggling to get onto the crosses. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, now it's time to talk about Belgium and some of the issues they faced, but also some of the potentials they show in certain ways how they were breaking down Canada. So all night long, we saw Belgium really struggling to play the ball out from the back, and that is because they didn't do what Canada done. Now, what were we talking about Canada doing? Creating overloads in their own defensive third, working the extra man. We said how if they had stuck with their back three against Belgium's front three, Canada would have found it difficult to get out because they would have been man for man pressed like this. Belgium didn't make the change, so they were pressed 3 versus 3. We can see Canada here have 3 forwards, all picking a centre-back each and just going man for man for them. Makes it incredibly difficult to play out from the back. We also had Eustaquio following very tightly on, this should be the other way around, sorry, Witsel. Everywhere Witsel went, Eustaquio was there. And then if it was Tielemans taking kind of like the time to drop deeper, Eustaquio would then follow him and Hutchinson would take up Witsel. So again, man for man, even when Belgium are dropping a midfielder deeper to try and play out from the back, they were still followed. And it just made it incredibly difficult. At times they would try and go to the wing-backs. The wing-backs would kind of come deeper and deeper to try and get on the ball. But again, Canada had the wing-backs to match up to them. And the same down this side of the pitch as well. And it was essentially man for man, which then means you've got to win your individual duels. Basically, Belgium didn't win their individual duels. And personally, I wasn't too impressed with what Roberto Martinez was doing. I think he should have changed and adapted. One thing that he could have done, which would have massively helped them, was push the wing-backs really far up the pitch. So what he was doing, he kept bringing the wing-backs deeper and deeper to try and kind of give the extra man for the play-out. The better solution would have been to push them the other way. Push them right up here, pin Alphonso Davies back, push Carrasco up, push the right wing-back all the way back. It then gives them a decision, because if Canada want to carry on pressing like they are doing here, then we can see that Hazard and De Bruyne can now become the free man. Now yes, Miller is on De Bruyne and Johnston is on Hazard, but De Bruyne and Hazard have that extra quality on the ball that the first touch is right. They are better than Johnston and Miller. They would have found some success and they could have gone way more direct into these areas. This sort of pocket of space here with the wing back pushing forward, opening up this pocket of space. That is what Belgium should have done, but they didn't. Instead, they kind of persisted with this idea of dropping the wing-backs deep, trying to play out from the back, and it really just didn't work very well. Now, despite that, there was the occasional situation where they did, and that was because De Bruyne and Hazard were dropping into central areas, and they could now get 4 players around Hutchinson and Eustaquio, something that they had to do more in this game. When you play against 2 midfielders, and you have Hazard and De Bruyne in your team, get them in these central areas, get them working around here. In general, Belgium didn't do this anywhere near enough, but there was the odd situation where they did, where Canada's press wasn't quite right, where David was just a little bit slow, and it allowed Alderweireld to play through the lines, get the ball to someone like Hazard, or in particular De Bruyne, who we know normally is deadly in this situation. De Bruyne is probably the best player in the world in this type of situation, where he's carrying the ball, and then he's just got to make that split-second decision to thread a ball through for one of his strikers, or through for Hazard to run onto. Belgium got into this situation on a far more regular basis than what I think you probably realise. We look at Canada and say they played really well. From a defensive point of view, they still looked really vulnerable. De Bruyne got into this position so many times and should have got assists, but he was just off it completely. He got man of the match at the end, and he said himself he didn't deserve it, and thinks he only got it because of his name, and I agree. De Bruyne was really, really bad. Really, really bad. But I guess the important thing for Belgium is that they were this bad, didn't play very well. Their best player in Kevin De Bruyne didn't really show up at all and was actually detrimental to the team, yet they still won. In terms of if you want to put a positive spin on it, that's probably the way to look at it for Belgium. Yes, they didn't play well, the key players didn't show up. They still got 3 points. So if they start playing a bit better, and the likes of De Bruyne and Hazard perform a bit more, then maybe Belgium will be okay. But I just think Roberto Martinez should have done more in the game. I wouldn't be too worried about the performances of individuals, because we know De Bruyne, he'll have an off day, but then the next game he'll be incredible. Tactically, they weren't right, and Martinez should have done more to adapt to that. Now, eventually he kind of did. He moved Castagna over to the left-hand side and brought Munier on at right wing-back, taking Carrasco off, and that gave them a little more defensive protection against someone like Alphonso Davies, having a natural defender on this side of the pitch. And we also saw Onana coming on for Tielemans, which gave, again, Belgium a bit more protection off the ball. But this just meant that they had less going forward now, because Onana isn't as good on the ball as what Tielemans is, and Munier isn't as good going forward as what Carrasco is. So he kind of had half sort of defensive solutions by just taking an attacking player off, putting a defensive player on. Tactically though, Roberto Martinez really didn't impress me in this game. But Belgium did get the win, and it all came from one moment of quality. And this is what happens when you are a team like Belgium against a team in Canada who aren't the best in the world. And all it took was one moment of time for Alderweireld. Just pings a ball over the top. The defending is awful. You can't get done by one long ball this easily. And Batshuayi races through and puts quite a nice finish into the back of the net. Far too easy. And if you actually watch the goal, Batshuayi spends several seconds just trotting about offside up here. Goes, alright, I'll get back onside. And then runs in behind and scores. And I don't know if any of you have ever done scouting work before. I have done it for a club. This is what it's always like watching a striker. You spend half your game and they're just trotting about offside, but then suddenly they score a hat-trick. So strikers are a really weird position to scout. Batshuayi's goal kind of captured that perfectly, because he's just trotting about offside, minding his own business, not really doing much, pops back onside, and then runs in behind and scores the goal. From Canada's point of view, defensively, really not very good. And overall, Canada were unlucky. Scoring that penalty early on when they deserved to be ahead really would have changed the game. They maybe could have had another penalty as well, a couple of questionable calls here and there, but nothing too glaringly obvious, I don't think. But in general, I thought Canada were the better team, and I'm a little bit worried for Belgium moving forward. I think they'll get through this group. I think they have enough quality. Croatia and Morocco didn't look particularly special. I thought Morocco were decent, but I think Belgium will be okay. I think Belgium will get through this group. In terms of how far can they go, Roberto Martinez needs to improve his tactical in-game management, but also, of course, the players need to show up. Regardless of all of that, Belgium did win. So, can't really complain too much. They did win, and was it deserved? Maybe not. But in tournament football, the most important thing, especially in the first game, is the 3 points. That's what Belgium got, so that's all I have to say on today's video. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.